Well, hello everyone. Welcome to another Agility Leadership Network meetup. I'm really happy that today we have an amazing talk from our good friend and community friend, Mr. Alkesh Shah, on how SAFe is safe. Obviously want to welcome my fellow co-host, Ashley. Hey, Ash.
Hello, everyone.
Hey. Without further ado, really just want to jump straight in on this because for me, this is absolutely a talk I've been looking forward to for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks from when Alkesh first shared it with me and signed him up on the dotted line to get the first outing of this anywhere. So Alkesh, I'm going to do a quick intro. Alkesh is a principal consultant at PA Consulting, has been an IBM Agile Thought Leader, Enterprise Agile Coach and trainer. Now, unbelievably, he backs his 40+ years of IT business experience, more like 15, with a breadth of academic qualifications from an MBA, BCS International Diploma in Business Analysis, Certified Scrum Master Professional and Product Owner, as well as SAFe SPC. I see Agile Enterprise Coach and Team Facilitator are amongst his list of accreditations. He's a great friend, and I really am very happy, and I know Ash is as well supporting me to have Alkesh here to do his talk, How Safe is Safe. Alkesh, over to you, my friend.
Too kind. Thank you, Giles. Let me share. Okay. Oops. Can you see the?
We can. Yep.
Oh, wait, what's going on here? Hold on 1 second. Sorry about that. Right. Is it showing the presentation screen?
It is.
It is.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, everyone, and welcome. Hopefully today's talk is going to be of interest to you. How safe is safe? It's what do we mean by safe? We'll come into this as well as having a good deeper look at SAFe 5.1 in particular. There are a lot of naysayers out there about SAFe and different frameworks, and we'll touch a bit on that too. I'm no way, I don't work for Scaled Agile, but and the reason for having a lot of different certifications and different vendors is that, as most good coaches, you would pick and pull, choose the elements that you need for your client and what makes it work for them. So I'm no way an advocate of just nothing but SAFe. I had to get it in there before I get too much heckling. Okay, I'm going to skip this one about why you should listen to me, because that was really nice, Giles. Thank you for reading. The key thing that I would like to get across is that I'm not one for prescribed models. I don't like this idea of, follow these 10 steps and that makes you agile. You all know in the room, I know many of you from different talks I've attended, that you all agree with me that being agile is far more than doing agile. So today's talk, we're going to look at what makes transformation to agile difficult. If it's such a simple common concept and simple to apply, what makes it complicated? We touched a bit on this in a few other talks we did around the birthday for the manifesto, but we'll touch a bit on this now to see what happens at enterprise levels. And at the enterprise level, we'll look at 5.1 and a closer look at what the elements are in it. So, and I have a mantra, nail it before you scale it. I don't think anybody should rush into trying to scale some of this stuff without actually understanding the purpose and the value of what they're trying to do. That counters a lot of what SAFe say and a few other people say, in that you should just start, and you should start right if you know you're going to be scaling it. I think little and often and try your way is far more crucial. Once you're predictable and you know you're safe and able to do it, then you can scale it easily. Food for thought. Okay, I want to know who we've got in the room before we go much further. So if you pop over to Menti, 62449990, or you get your phones and just bear me a second, I'll try and get my...
Can I share the link you shared with me earlier, Alkesh?
Yes, please.
There we go. I put it in the chat for everyone, which is, I think, is a short URL version to get there.
If I bring that up here and present it. Can you see the Menti screen shared?
Yes.
fantastic. Okay, definitely no, 86%. Wow, okay. Got my work cut out today. Just for fun, can more people say don't know? No, seriously, 71%. It's getting better. I think if I click on it, it should tell me how many. Okay, it's starting to slow. Okay, so a little over half of you then. So 61% of you definitely know. Let's see if we can look at why that is and what you don't like about it or what SAFe's trying to do. But 26% of you, 25%.
Someone's asking a question just in the chat. Do you mean attempt to use the SAFe framework, or you are using it?
Well, really, well, the next question might bring that to fore actually, because a lot of people use elements of SAFe, but they don't use the whole SAFe framework, and they don't prescribe to the subscriptions or the certifications, but they do buy into some of what SAFe has. So let's go on to that one then. But that's really good. So the 12%, hopefully you might find some of this of interest too as we dig a bit deeper into what SAFe is about. But that's really good to see that 64% of you have an aversion to it. I'd like to explore that. So next question is then, do you use any of the following? Lean portfolio management, program backlogs, PI planning, or value stream mapping? Interesting.
Alkesh.
Yeah.
That's those 4 choices assume that you use SAFe.
No, they don't. Well, a lot of people actually do things like PI planning, or they do value stream mapping to establish their teams, or they do LPM, but they don't subscribe to SAFe at all, which is ironic, but they do. And that was the point of this slide, was to identify who uses some of this stuff without. You'll see why they do that actually, because SAFe is a framework. I will come on to that.
I would say the only other thing to share from the chat is some people, are saying there's not an option for none, because some people don't want to. So that's not a bad thing. And some would say that they would like to choose multiples, which I think would probably be a good thing as well.
Oh, doesn't it that you choose? Oh, my mistake, so apologies. Yeah, I didn't realize it was single select. Yeah, I put this together very quickly. Okay, thank you. So PI planning looks like it's very heavily used, and you know about value stream mapping. That helps a lot. Great. Okay, let me just let me close. Okay, and back to my slides.
Yep.
Thank you. Well, before we go on, I just want to level set a few things. A few notes. One particular is that Agile, the way I see it, and I know I've been to a lot of different talks, and we talk about whether it's methodologies or what it is. And I want to say for the rest of this talk, my view very much is that Agile development is a philosophy. It's about a mindset way of doing things. It's not methodologies. It's not practices. And what I mean by that is, and you've seen this lots of times with me, it's about building business agility from a mindset perspective of purpose. You know, why is it you're doing what you're doing? What is it you're trying to do? How best can you get there? The most efficient, effective way of doing it. The practices help you along the way. And they're underpinned by principles, and those are underpinned by values to establish that mindset about being agile. But let's just get this right. For Agile, for me, it's a philosophy. Next one I want to get across is that everything we do, and the tools and the frameworks, everything we look at, goes through the same Shu-Hari model. And for Agile, I see this as doing Agile as practices. So you start with Shu, as in you don't know what you're doing. You get taught some practical methods or ways of approaching things. Once you begin to apply it to your context, you begin to discover a lot more. Now you start to break rules and you bend rules, and that's the hard part. And then you get to which is being agile. This is when you discover that actually now you understand why you do the things that you do, or how behavior works, how interactions work, what customers want, and how you can work out what they might desire. And that's where the mastery comes in. And now you might find your own way. You don't have to follow those prescribed methods at all. They've helped you get on your path, and some have tried and tested and work quite well. But nearly everything always evolves, which is the beauty of Agile. We never stand still. It's always continuously improving. Frameworks. This is a conversation the other day on the other talk with the lady about Agile 2. Forgive me, I forgot her name.
Lisa
Yeah,
Cooney. Lisa.
Yes, Lisa. And framework. Framework is, the framework I talk about with SAFe is not prescribed. You don't have to do all of it. It's a framework. Frameworks by nature mean that it's actually like scaffolding around a building. You build the building based off the scaffolding. If you don't have enough of it, you won't be able to do it. If you have too much of it, you won't be able to get to the building. Frameworks are an aid to get you there. You don't have to adopt it in full. And everything we talk about in this stuff is really about trying to get better predictability about delivery. Can we commit to, can we trust what's going to be delivered when they say it's going to be delivered? And can we do it in a way that we don't interrupt flow of work? There's a lot of other talks to do on flow. Key thing here I'm looking at is how can we make sure we can flow value uninterrupted? So looking at transformations, I see a number of reasons why transformations fail or that they're clumsy to do. We don't get enough senior buy-in. This is because most organizations at an enterprise level need some large-scale changes to be made. They need organizational change, they need people changes, they need things that need the most senior people to make the decisions to do. So systemic changes are difficult to do. Sometimes they think they're too senior and they think this agile stuff is the delivery things, lower down the tree. And so they don't get involved. That then becomes difficult when you try and do those systemic changes. Next is anchored pathways. People don't allow enough time to unlearn the way that they used to do things. So when you bring along a new agile concept, they automatically will link to an anchored way of thinking. They think, oh, I know what you mean. This is what I think it relates to. And they carry on doing the old way of working, but under the new labels. And then find that they've made it even more complex and messy and it's not really working. Heck, if it was working in the first place, you wouldn't be changing it. So fact is that people get anchored and they need to unlearn what they used to do. Next is through a transition period, as they're moving from that old way of working to the new, they still have business as usual to do. So they've committed loads work that they're doing. And the organization, and again, the senior leaders need to understand this, is that there has to be a dip in productivity whilst they're picking up a new way of doing things. They won't suddenly be able to be as effective or even better because that's the purpose of going to Agile. What they'll find is for a short time, they'll actually dip because they're learning something new, trying to apply it, rethinking the way they used to do stuff. So that overcommitted load can get in the way. We don't have a common taxonomy, and that can cause all sorts of issues because people will run off with misinterpretations of what you mean. So I'm not saying we have to train everybody. That can be an expensive exercise. What I do say is there has to be sufficient communication and shared knowledge that says when we talk about a backlog item or a user story, we know what we're talking about. Everybody's on the same page. But those are what I think are considerable problems that I've seen in the years of transformations. What do you think? You step over to Slido. Bring up my Slido screen.
I have another link I can share, don't I?
Yes, you do.
Yes.
If you go to slido.com/920401.
The link is in the chat.
Thank you. I'll try and bring that onto this page. Okay, tell me, it's like a word cloud, so you can type away. Just tell me what you think might be an issue for Agile adoption. What sort of things? I've given you some tips there. Sorry, I can't get the speaker working properly, otherwise you'd have some crappy music in the background.
I love the QR code usage. I've seen phones going up to screens, which is great to see. I love it. Modern technology at its best.
Command and control culture, yes. Culture is a big piece. Trust. Untrained staff, yes. Middle management, feeling. Yeah, there's a lot of territorial stuff that goes on. Adaptability, forcing. Continue old behavior, yeah. So, very funny. Yes. On a more serious note, I'd like to hear later why 401. Okay, fear is a big one. Yeah. Disguise status quo. Yeah, people do the same as they used to do because they don't want to learn something new, or they don't think. Yeah, they're worried for their jobs or whatever. You know. Increasing complexity. Tailor risk management. Yeah. Fantastic. Maybe capture some of this. In people's mindset. Yes. That's brilliant. Over expectations, a big one. Great, I think that's slowed down enough. Fantastic, thank you guys. So I think we're going to we do touch a lot of these. They're still coming in. Do catch a lot of these in the next few slides that explain why transformations have been so unsafe. And it's not because of methodologies, it's because of human behavior and practice, to be honest. Lack of vision, yeah, I like that. Fantastic, thank you. Interest of time, I'm going to go back to my slides. Thank you very much for that. So other things that can make an unsafe transformation at enterprise level, some of this you've captured in the Slido. Understand the purpose and need for change and communicating shared vision. I think somebody mentioned on there alignment and shared vision. Lack of clear purpose and unclear goals, not having shared vision in the first place. These can be addressed through being more customer centric, understanding that everything we do delivers value and value to a customer, whether that's an internal customer, an external customer, a consumer, whatever you want to call them. You're giving, I say this all the time, Agile is simply producing product or services by people, for people, to be used by people. So it's got to be what's in it for them. Understand the customer, understand the pain points, don't make their life worse. There's no senior buy-in. Lean Agile leadership can take care of a lot of this too. This looks at servant leadership, looks at ways in which they can act in an empathetic, in a vulnerable way, and helping people to just see a vision and then help you get there, because they're the experts in the room. Organizational hierarchies get in the way and complexity of an organization. Some organizations are so stupidly big and complex, nobody wants to spend the money to try and fix that. But they find ways through it that works. Again, the talk at birthday will cover that a bit better. But organizational hierarchies aren't going to go away. So having an organizational agility can help. This is where you have a dual operating system, one that looks after the hierarchy, because it's still going to be needed at some scale. Even these startups, they work really well, really dynamic, but as they grow and grow, we just look at what's happened to Spotify and Netflix. As they grow and grow, they get to a size where then the hierarchical structure has to come in to try and manage and govern what's there. But you still, at the same time, need that dynamism of agility. Unclear roles and responsibilities. David Rock says, one of the most, the key things that stress people, psychological safe damage, is having unclear roles and responsibilities and uncertainty. We don't know what the future is going to hold. We all like to know and predict just a little bit forward. Well, team and technical agility can take care of that too. It can help you create cross-functional teams that help each other understand what their purpose is. Not necessarily the detail of what they do, that's up to them, that's their skill. But the way in which they interact with each other is something which we can build on. Somebody mentioned in the Slido about unrealistic expectations. Expectations is a big one. And again, this comes with overcommitment. Sometimes organizations get budget based on what they're saying they're going to go and do, but then they don't go and deliver it because they said what they're going to do, knowing that they need to get the money. And if they said they do less, they get less money, and then they end up not delivering it, they get even less. So it's backwards way around. What it should be is to say, look, hold your money. I'll tell you what I think the customer is asking for and how we can get the most efficient way. And iteratively, I'll deliver, and you give me the money to do the next iterations. That way of funding means that we're saving money if we have to pivot. It means that we're repurposing the money that we're keeping to do other work. The whole thing works. It's an agile budgeting approach. But unrealistic expectations is a big one. Again, that can be fixed through lean portfolio management and agile product delivery. So deliver little, often, be ready to change. It has to be viable, desirable, etc. Be a continuous learning culture. Constantly listen to the feedback, everything that you're doing, the way in which you're doing it internally, right through to what the customers are saying about using what you've produced. But misaligned cadence is another issue. This is where pockets of Agile are working really well, and they're working to different kind of cadences. Cadence is the rhythm, the drumbeat that they work to. And cadence and synchronization are two big issues why sometimes Agile at scale can fall over. Customers' demands of speed and delivery are growing all the time. We can't keep up, to be honest. We have, I think in the stats, of 63% in the state of Agile, say 60% of organizations, leaders are saying that they have to go faster just to stand still. And we're one of them. I mean, I said to Giles the other day, I buy from Amazon, I'll only buy Prime anyway. Now I've got to buy a Prime same day delivery. And I don't know why, because if I'll buy it same day and it will arrive and it will sit in the corner for 2 days because I haven't got time to open it. But it's the way we're programmed into on-demand TV all the way through to the way we buy things. So we're driven, our environment drives customer demands faster and faster. So enterprise solution deliveries can help us here, trying to do things in a more consistent, broader way, but something that can be easily locally adaptable. So the reason for showing you these on the right-hand side is they're actually SAFe's approach to trying to fix some of these unsafe enterprise issues that have come up. We class them under business agility.
It's great, actually. I was just going to say, Ian's just shared some tips. As many of these tips are applicable to organizational change generally, which is a good thing. So I think everybody's absolutely lined up.
Fantastic. No fruit yet. So 5.1, this is the latest incarnation of SAFe. It's gone through from 2011. It's gone through 5 major iterations, and then .1 has added a few more features. But as a framework, it's now changing away. It's still got the big picture. You'll see that in a second. But it's now focusing much more on business agility. And to that end, it's putting the customer dead center, which is where it should have been right from the beginning. Everything we do for value should be for a customer. Now, I'm not going to go through each of these in the interest of time, but some things to think about are complex organizations can frustrate across the enterprise. So the more complex the organization is, the more nuances you end up having to deal with, and it can get in the way, it can stifle the way in which adoption can work. But this can also be cultural and territorial. Territorial, and I think again some people said on the Slido, fear factor and understanding. It's about people worried that their empires are going to change in this new cross-functional way, new dynamic way of moving people, moving the work to people and things like that. It's just changing the way that they used to control their environments and their budgets. Culturally, it's a rapid change too, but if they don't adopt this change, they're not going to survive. Business agility attempts to empathize with all of this. So those 7 facets on the outside, all of those are freely available for you to look into at scaledagile.com. But we'll go into a little bit of detail in some of them in a sec. mentioned the big picture. Here's the big picture, and those 8 items that I just showed, the 7 down the side and the customer in the center. And so those are around it. For those of you not familiar with SAFe, I'll just quickly run through this and then we'll go into a bit more detail. But please do remember this framework isn't a mandated methodology. You don't have to do all of it. In fact, it's not even a methodology, it's a framework. It's built on industry expertise. It pulls together, and you'll see this, and we'll talk about different methods in a second. Scaled Agile have added 1 or 2 little bits of their own, but nearly everything has come from all of the greats in our industry, from Jeff Sutherland to Ken Schwaber all the way through to Simon Sinek as well. Roles and responsibilities are clear. Sometimes people say SAFe works because of these roles that go all the way up through the hierarchy, senior roles, in fact, and that forces a change to adopt SAFe. Today it's more ground up, but some of that is true. But again, back to Dave Rock's thing, having role clarity will help organizations. Okay, so let me take you through this quickly. So this, on the left-hand side here, the roles involved. We try and mix business and technology together. That's a big plus point already. At the very basic level, at the team level, you have a product owner, Scrum Master, and the Agile team. So it's based on Scrum, but you can put Crystal in, you can put in Kanban, you can put whatever you like in. This is just a suggestion that at team level, you have, at the very least, some roles responsible. So those teams work in these individual columns here called sprints or iterations in SAFe. And they're usually a couple of weeks apart, and their job is to produce something that's been agreed up front. Now, we'll talk about that upfront planning in a second. Each one of these operates in a DevOps way, so it still brings in all of these continuous exploration through to delivery. And so operating DevOps, operating built-in quality, doing business, TDD, BDD, etc., and fitting a solution around a context. So there has to be a purpose for doing it. But it starts off life with what the customer needs, a bit of design thinking to understand what they really need and what the real pain points you're trying to fix. And it introduces use of Kanbans, use of Scrum, XP, etc. It's whatever works for you in terms of the delivery. The bottom line here, the red thing, is an architectural runway. The architect's team, the architect looks ahead to say what's coming down the road based on your plan and what needs to be ready and able to be able to help you to deliver that. So that's what the runway is about. This line here corresponds to this area is the base SAFe model called Essential. And it has 2 levels. So the teams themselves, as I said, product owner, Scrum Master, etc. And those teams together form an Agile release train. An Agile release train, read team of teams. So each team still has sort of 5, 7 people-ish, but up to 125 of them will club together towards a value stream delivery. So that little blue thing behind is a single value stream. Each of the Scrum Masters work together to a release train engineer who's responsible for all of the Scrum Masters on this release train. Equally, the product owners, each one of those prioritize their work for the teams, so that it's important then that those prioritizations are synchronized. So all of the product owners group together and come under the product manager. So again, it's not a hierarchy, it's simply just somebody to go to say, this is what we're doing, this is how we're doing it, and it gets coordinated. Likewise, the system architect will then get involved with this architectural runway and making sure that the train can run. Going up a level then, if you've got multiple trains, so you've got multiple teams of teams working towards your value stream because it's bigger, it's doing several things. Say you're a bank and you're doing lending and you're doing maybe fraud and maybe account opening, lots of different functions, then each one of those would be effectively another team of teams, but they're all working towards one value stream. In that case, that's a solution train. We'll touch on these again a little later. This is simply how it scales. So now you have a solution train engineer who all the release train engineers from each of the ARTs, the Agile release trains, would then report to and synchronize with. The product managers, all of those clubbed together from each of the trains will come together under solution management. And all of the architects will come under the solution architect. It's a very simple model of scaling. It looks hideous when you first look at this, but actually it's very simple and clean. Now that was a single value stream with multiple trains. If you're a part of a bigger organization, a conglomerate with many different value streams, then each of the value streams containing multiple trains of their own would be effectively a portfolio. So at a portfolio, you have strategic themes come in, a plan of what you want the organization to do over the next year or so. And then through lean budgeting, establishing guardrails, having a Kanban that talks through, right, this is the work that's coming in. Is it strategically aligned? Is it something that's going to help us? Can we break it down into being able to be delivered? What value is it going to be? And that will find its way down into these individual value streams. And you have key performance indicators, OKRs. There's lots of different models they can use to map that. We'll talk about value streams a bit more in a second. But you see how simple all of this scales up. Talking of methods, all of our methods that we know, and there are many more, I've only listed a few on here, but I deliberately chose some of these because of their ages. You know, Agile is not new by far, but they all group together because they're united under the fact of these 12 principles that we know and love from 2001. Some are very old though, like Kanban, for example. One of the earliest signs of use of Kanban, it wasn't called Kanban then, was the two-box method for Spitfire production in 1940. They found that by putting the right tools in the right place so that people could get to them quickly, improved flow. And it was a very simple method of getting something like a Kanban. In 1948, Toyota took it another level further, also introducing lean, the 7 wastes, the Timwood, 7 wastes, 7 the Muramura, etc. Mary and Tom Pobendick accredited with bringing that to Agile. But it's back as far as 1948. We're talking 70 plus years ago, 80 plus years ago. And then we have Scrum, 1993, although it actually started life in 1986 with Nananka and Takiachu, I think it was, who did a Harvard paper that Jeff Southern liked, and he modeled Scrum from that, first mention of Scrum. But all of these, many of these models that you see on the screen are actually based off of Scrum. They use Scrum as a base underneath and just establish and improve on various elements, because all of them, to a greater or lesser extent, support the principles in the middle. Some are strong in some areas, some are weak in others. And that's why many people mix and match some of these different methods. Extreme programming, for example, brought along the DevOps side, a whole number of different things in terms of development in a much better way. But fundamentally, it's Scrum underneath. So a lot of these, though, rarely scale to deliver solutions at the enterprise level. They work great with small teams. They work great when you mix and match a few of them. A classic mix, for example, is Scrum and Kanban together, Scrumban. In fact, it's so popular, it's found its way now as a method on the metrics that say, you know, the state of Agile actually has, I think it's 8% now, use Scrumban. This is where you still operate as a Scrum in sprints, but you have a Kanban board that visually shows you what's happening with the flow. So Kanban traditionally is a time box, but you're effectively time boxing through the sprint. It's a good mix. But again, here you can see some of the ages, some of the differences, but they don't operate too well across the enterprise. Some are designed to descale. So scale, for example, and less. What they're doing is they're descaling the organization. They're saying, let's find a simpler, quicker way of delivering things by changing the organization, try and reduce the scale and complexity of it in order to achieve what we need to do. Others go the other way and they actually build on methods. So Scrum at Scale, for example, the very latest one from Jeff, he looks at scaling up the use of Scrum and building in executive action teams that will try and work on impediments on a regular basis, on a sprint, in fact, to then allow the whole thing to work a lot smoother and quicker, and it's scalable, bigger and bigger. What SAFe does is it takes some of these to a degree. So SAFe takes Kanban, Scrum, XP, and Lean very heavily. You'll see that across the model in a second. Around 4.5, they started to add building in quality and DevOps. And what happens is that they inherit, because they've taken Scrum, they've taken Kanban, all of their own strengths that they've got are now all absorbed into SAFe as a framework. So this framework now supports all of those individual strengths of those pieces, but just brought into the framework. And this works really well because we live in a VUCA world. You've heard me say that many times: volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And we can associate across all of those by better improvement, visibility, alignment, all of those things that we spoke about, the unsafeness, and how that's tackled. So going back to that essential, you can see how Scrum, Kanban, XP, for example, fit. So Scrum fits with using backlogs, using those roles. Kanban's either the iterations done as a Kanban, but you have to absolutely have a Kanban at the program level. XP brought us the DevOps support, and Lean, as in the Lean Agile leadership. The next level up, as I said, the solution level, Lean continues. We now do Lean UX and the roles build, same as you saw before. And at the full level, the portfolio level, we now have Lean budgeting and Lean portfolio management. Deploying SAFe, using that model, then is looking at 4 values and 10 principles. They have their own principles. It's not trying to replace anything. It's building on what we've already got. A little bit like Lisa's one the other day, but this is actually looking at how the enterprise would use it. So key things here are alignment. Again, in the slide, some of you said that alignment is, or misalignment is, an issue. People are working on different things. So bringing people onto the same agenda is key. Building in quality, using behavior-driven development, making sure that it doesn't just do what it says it's supposed to do, but it's used the way you expect it to be used. And evaluating and testing along the way all the time. So building in quality, do less, do it better. All of those kind of things come into that. Transparency. Transparency breeds trust. It breeds predictability. There's a lot of reasons why you need clear, transparent ways of working. And program execution is about using these program increments and planning to get you there. We'll touch on that a bit more in a sec. So on the side, we've also got the 10 principles. Taking an economic view is the first and foremost, which is really, in a nutshell, it's about prioritizing work so that you can get the highest value out in the shortest possible time. So don't work on the biggest things, don't work on the smallest things. Find out what's of most value and work on that. And if you can get it out quicker, you can get revenue for it, you can reduce costs for it, you can, whatever the reason is, you'll realize it earlier. Think holistically. So applying systems thinking is about not just the piece you're working on, but thinking upstream and downstream. So you don't cause more of an issue. This is an old Deming thing, but it works really, really well. Assume variability. You know things are going to change. You know you may not have the right answer to start with. We know we introduced the word pivot, but here we're talking about try and maintain 2 or 3 different options of what you might do as you progress through the kind of uncertainty and knowing what you're doing. The idea being that if you do need to suddenly change, you're not starting back from the beginning. You're not losing too much. It's quicker and easier to change. It's cheaper to change. Build incrementally with fast integrated learning cycles. That's what Agile is all about. I don't need to say too much on that for you. Base milestones on objective evaluation of work. So what we're saying there is don't plan the next thing until you have right feedback and you've evaluated what you're doing as you're doing it. And be prepared to pivot if you need to. Visualizing and the limiting work in progress. This is operating through a Kanban to be able to say, let's not flood it. Let's pull the work at stage to stage through that Kanban based on how much we can do based on our capacity. And all of this for predictability is about how much capacity do we have and what skill sets do we have to be able to deliver. There's no good saying, yeah, I'll do it all, and then give half of it, because it just doesn't, that's bad. Transparency breaks the trust, etc., etc. What's much better is to say, right, I see what you want. This is the resources that I've got. This is how many people I've got, how much skill set they've got, and therefore this is all I'm going to be able to deliver. But I can't guarantee that's what I am going to deliver. But even being able to deliver it, you need to be able to make it small enough and fast enough to be able to get through the system quickly. And that means managing queues, managing the size of the work you're doing, managing work in progress at any one time, so you're not overloading individuals. But it's all about maintaining that flow. Applying cadence and synchronization, as I mentioned earlier. Cadence is the rhythm, the drum beat. If you're doing 2-week sprints, make sure everybody is doing 2-week sprints and they end at the same time. Synchronizing is to make sure that all of the different perspectives are taken care of and considered, so everybody's on the same page. Unlock the intrinsic motivation of knowledge workers is about motivating them to do the right things. They are your experts. They've been hired to do this stuff. You need to listen to them. Dan Pink does some great work in this area. Decentralized decision making is again about flow. If we can allow decision making to be done at the team level rather than having to wait for approvals or somebody with a clipboard to make a decision, you can maintain flow. You can get things done a lot quicker. There's no point in going to a 2-week or a 1-week sprint and then suddenly finding that you're holding things up because you're having to wait for other people to make decisions. That's daft. There are some decisions that have to be centrally made, things like those economies of scale or global or strategic decisions, of course, but the rest of the decisions should be made by the people you've hired to do the work for you. The latest principle is 10. It's been added at version 5, called Organize Around Value. And again, this is about understanding who is actually getting value and how do you make sure that everything you've formed, the value streams, etc., are built to deliver that value. So we'll look at that in a sec. As I say, for me, all of this is about trying to get predictable delivery that you can trust will be there, and flow of value. So value stream mapping. I know several of you said you already do this, so hopefully this isn't going to bore you too much, but there's some who's new to this. Talk about agile release trains. How we form them is by doing this. So if you map out a value stream, that's trigger to cash. So from a customer wanting something to them actually paying you for actually doing it, what are all the main stages that you had to go through to get there? So you map that out. Nothing too detailed. You're not branching off to things. This is just high level. And that high level next step, you say, what are all the systems that are involved with delivering each of those elements of the value? Then you look at the people. What people are involved in each of those systems? And then you group them together. We call it kidney shape because you literally form kidney shapes on the screen, where you group together different people who are associated to deliver that value. And those people would then form your agile release train, who can do defining, building, testing, and releasing all in one, so all end-to-end of that value. And the beauty of doing this way is that those group of people aren't interrupted or cluttered by things they don't need to know about because there's another part of the value stream. So by focusing just on the pieces they need to do, they'll work a lot more efficiently, effectively, be happier doing it. So that's how you form your so development value streams are effectively your agile release trains. And as I said, when you group them together, you'll form a solution to multiple agile release trains and use roadmaps to plan what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. I'm not going to go into too much detail on that. In terms of how they get their work, so the portfolio at the very top level as work comes in, that is prioritized to try and get the maximum value in the shortest time. We call that weighted shortest job first. And that work is then broken down into features and enablers. Enablers are elements of work that need to be done to be able to build a feature. And those are broken down from the portfolio into the program backlogs. So there's a program backlog for each Agile release train. Each one of those is then broken down further into team backlogs, which are all the teams involved in an individual release train. So here's an example. This red feature is split down into 2 different Agile release trains. And each of those Agile release trains will then do elements across the teams in order to deliver value to it. It's really that simple. And there's some rules that they have. So user stories are done so that they fit within the sprint, 2 weeks. Ideally, we say user stories would be anything from a matter of hours to maximum of 2 weeks. But smaller the better, because then there's less chance of change, more chance of you completing it. Features enablers have to be done within the program increment, which is a 10 to 12 week period. And epics can last multiple program increments. PI planning, I mentioned. Let's look at that next. So the ring in the middle is what the team does, and you're familiar with this. This is a standard Scrum, daily stand-ups, retros, etc. Review. The middle ring is then the Agile release train. And what that does is it has PO sync, so all the POs involved in all of the teams get together and make sure that their priorities are synchronized, because someone's dependency might be somebody else's priority. Scrums, working with the release train engineer, they get together and say what kind of issues they've been dealing with and what they've found workarounds for, or collectively find ways of fixing what they can. And that keeps it going. In the outer ring, there's a couple of other things. So what we have is inspect and adapt and preparing PI planning. Those are specific schedule times in the whole cycle, which we'll touch on the calendar in a sec. And they end with a system demo. Much like each team ends its sprint with a review, with a demo, the release train ends with a system demo. So all of the teams put together, what did they produce? And on the most outer ring is where you've got multiple Agile release trains. For them is a little bit extra. You have a pre and a post PI planning, because again, you're trying to maintain flow, and the best way of doing that is any dependencies or any issues or anything you need to find out about. Let's find out about those before the event, so that the event itself runs as smoothly as possible. And that ends with a solution demo. And again, you have an architect sync and a solution train sync, which is the extra pieces. To see how it scales, really simple. So I mentioned the PI calendar. At the end of your 10 or 12 weeks, you have, let's say you have 2 weekly sprints, then you'd have an extra 2 weeks, which is called an IP, Innovation and Planning. And what innovation and planning is about is initially you have a little spillover time for things that didn't quite finish. I don't like this personally because it effectively says you've got more time. You haven't. But if you do find that there's something that's spilled over, the validation period, making sure that what you're producing is sound, everything's dotted I's, crossed T's, it's acceptable. And then you have a big innovation period. This is great. This is where the magic happens. There's some brilliant stuff that's come out, like Google's Gmail, for example, was the byproduct of a innovation period of work. It wasn't anything to do with their regular work, but they just guys just came up with something better than Outlook. That kind of stuff. There's many more examples of that. But that innovation period allows people time to breathe and think. The work that they've done the last 10 weeks or so, they could have done some things a little differently. They know they've got to learn about certain areas. Maybe there's new technologies, something they need to do. Most times they have a spike in this period where they'll spend a few days learning a new technology or language or whatever. But that's that period there. Then the readiness. What planning readiness is about is making sure that the leaders are ready with their visions and their plans for the next 10 to 12 week period. Then the following week starts with the solution pre-PI planning. That's if you are operating multiple release trains, then there's a synchronizing to be done of what everybody's been working on. If you were to show them this vision and what you'd like them to do, how much dependency are they going to have with each other and with externals? Externals being other parts of the organization or real externals. Then you have a bit more innovation, any education that's needed, new technologies again. Then you have this inspect and adapt, which says in the last PI, there were a number of issues that came up. Let's vote on what the biggest issue is that we could work on. And you have this workshop where you can come up with ideas of fixing it, because if this is properly putting in lessons learned, things that have happened before, let's see if we can fix them so that when we move forward, we can make it smooth as you like. Then there's a 2-day planning event, which I could show you in a sec. And then you finish with a post PI, which is where any existing risks or bits and pieces left over, you need to be aware of at the solution level. What is it? Again, all of this is just trying to make sure you're predictable and stable. In COVID world, we do a lot of remote PI planning. And here's an example. There's scattered over 4.5 days. There's no hard and fast rule here. The rule is, though, that everybody who's involved should be in this. That means that for those 2 days, you have every senior leader who's involved, every person right the way down to the individual developer, because any one of those people missing might have a nugget of information that could interrupt your flow. So let's make sure everybody's on the same page, everybody's involved, everybody's in there. These are expensive exercises when you try and get 125 people in a warehouse somewhere, but they are worth it. I'll give you an example of what can be achieved because of that. First Direct, a bank who they were taking 47 days to process mortgage applications. The UK average at the time was 10. So they had some work to do. But through PI planning and through having the right people in the room to be able to go to straight away and say, is there a reason why we need 4 approvals for this or 2 approvals, whatever, yeah? And they said, no, let's try something different. Let's put different guardrails in. And on the fly, they were able to do things. And within the first few PIs, they got that 47 days down to 7. They beat the UK average and they improved. But here's the magic. They didn't spend a penny on IT. All of it was just business process. All of it was just over complex ways of doing things they didn't see until they got in a room together to do it. So there's some great advantages of doing this kind of PI planning. So PI planning day 1 is about alignment. The business will say to everybody in the release train, and if you've got multiple release trains, they'll stagger them by an hour or so. So they can go to each one and say, here's the business context. This is what's happening to us as an organization. This is why we want you to do, help us get to where we want to get to in 10 weeks' time. Here's the vision of what we'd like to see happen. And therefore, these are sort of big features, big ideas that we've got that we'd like to see. At their business level, they don't really understand detail of how this is going to work. They just know they'd like to see some of this capability. The architects and the leaders, the tech leads will then come in and say, based on that vision, these are some of the technologies that we think you should be using, or some of the upgrades you're going to have to make, or some of the changes, or some of the things to watch out for. Like, we can't use this particular cloud solution because of security or whatever, right? And then there's a planning context of where the teams go away now and say, okay, based on those features, we're going to take, as team A, we're going to take this feature and we're going to break it down, and we're going to define how much capacity we have over this next 10-week period, who's away, who's not, working out roughly eight points per person. And then you take away a point for each person who's away for a day. Don't try tying to time, but if you've never done this before, you need to start somewhere. And the reason we say 8 is because in a 2-week sprint, you've got 10 working days. Take away the buffer, leaves you 8 working days that you can use. So that gives you capacity. If you've got 5 people, that's effectively 40 points available. And then you work out your stories, high-level stories from the feature you've just picked up, and you break those down and try and estimate them, how big do you think they are? And you try and then slot them into the sprints until you use that capacity up. So on a sprint by sprint basis, now you know roughly what you're going to be able to do when you're going to do it. This is great. This is very different to the business saying, I want this and you're going to give me all of it. Now what they're saying is, I want this. I'm not sure how to get there, but it would be great if we could have these 10 things happen. And you as an organization, as teams, are saying, based on our skills and capacity, we can give you 6 of them, but this is all we can do because that's all we can do. And the business then has to say, okay, well, if I'm only going to get those 6, this is what I'm going to rejig what I need to do. But I have to accept that because, hey, I'm not going to magic people out of thin air. This is top down, bottom up. Then you have a draft review looking at all of those objectives and things that each of the teams are saying that they're going to do. And you have a program board that shows how all the dependencies work. And if you have too many dependencies, then in the management review at the end of the first day, this isn't with everybody, this is just the seniors, say they might change the scope, they might change some team members. What they're trying to do is get rid of as many of the dependencies as possible. And the following day, they then come back to the teams and say what changes they've made. The teams then go away and update themselves or finish what they're doing. And when they finish now their list of objectives, the business owner comes along and values them. And what they do is they put a business value against the different things that the team says it's going to do. Some things may be more valuable than others. And so the product owner will now be able to help when they start doing team level work, enough time to look at those. And they have committed and uncommitted objectives. I won't go into too much detail with those, but basically it's just things that they know they've got to get done, but they don't have enough knowledge to do it at the time. Then you have a final review. Everybody gets together with all of their plans and they roll up the plans. So common things end up on a big program objective. And they look at risks. These are risks that are program risks that you've identified that may trip the whole thing up. Team risks you should already be capturing and mostly be able to sort. Program risks you can't, and so collectively you need to be aware of them. And you run those risks. That means you have an owner, you have an acceptance or mitigation for them. Then the most important bit of the whole event is the confidence vote. This is where every single person in the room has to put their hand up to a fist of 5. Either they're very confident with the plan or they're not confident at all. And anytime anybody with less than 3 fingers up means that you have to stop and listen to that person, see what is it that they're not comfortable about. And then maybe some rework is going to be needed. Hopefully they'd have spoken up by now, but maybe they've just thought of something, or maybe something's come out of the woodwork. Wouldn't it be great to know that before you start doing anything? So it'd be great to listen to them now, rework what you need to do, and make sure everybody has at least 3 fingers of confidence or up to 5 fingers of confidence before you move forward. So that's, again, putting the emphasis on the teams to say, look, you know what you can do. I trust you. You tell me what you can do. And if you're confident in delivering what you say you're going to deliver, I'll buy that. And then finally, you have a planning retrospective where you say, how did the 2 days go? What can we pick up for next time? This is an example of a program board. Each of the teams say what they're working on, and they use string to join these things together. Oh, hello, can you still hear me?
Yep, yeah, we can hear you, mate. Yep.
Sorry. That's a cool comment. Yeah, so the string is showing what these different dependencies are. And at the top row, any milestones, any dead zones you've got, like here in 1.3, 5 weeks in, there's a milestone, a marketing event or something we're stuck to having to deliver to, whereas everything else is potentially movable. And you look for things where the dependencies don't make sense. You might want to talk to these 2 teams to see if we can move something around, and dependencies on external things. But this is the spaghetti that the management team look at to say, can we simplify this? Can we move things around? Can we change the scope? Because what we want to do is try and deliver as predictably as possible. Last few promise. I say nail it before you scale it. So all of this stuff that I've just told you about and how it can address a lot of the issues and how simple that scaling can work, doesn't mean you dive in and do it. We've had organizations say to us, we want to go agile. They can't even tell us why to start with, but we want to go agile and we want to go safe. And we're saying, why? What are you trying to do? But no, we're very complex. We need to have something complex and big to support us, something like the SAFe framework. And for us, it's like somebody trying to book themselves into a marathon in a week's time when they can't even walk properly. So, yeah, I say, let's get predictable. Let's understand what you're doing. Use Scrum properly, etc. All of that. before you then enter something like scaling. Appreciate in bigger organizations, you might have to start looking at pockets to pull together, but let's try and get some of that predictability yourselves first. Size of teams, people say to us, oh, no, I have big teams. I've got 125 people in my team, or I've got 200 people in my team. No, they haven't. What they've got is small pockets of teams, sub-teams within there that work really well together. Collectively, they don't. Dunbar is a psychologist who said, we have a capacity of dealing with so many direct communication links, and 125 is a maximum. So that's why Agile release trains have roughly 10 teams max, now to give you about 125 people, including all the Scrum Masters and product owners. Have clear business context and aspirational vision. So when you're trying to align everybody, have something aspirational, have something exciting, get them involved, get them wanting to be part of this, because that will get their creative juices going. So when they pick a feature and amongst them work out how they might get you there, they can come up with some really good innovative ideas. And that can only happen if there's something worth working for. Give them purpose. And take the time to do the innovation and planning. Please don't get rid of that. If you do adopt this and you do PI planning, try and factor in your IP session, because besides the planning, the innovation part is probably, for me, the most important. Okay, so just summing up, as I said, 5.1 does address a number of those enterprise level issues. First and foremost, it's customer centric, and everything's geared around value delivery, organizing around the value. Trying to get predictable delivery. This is really for customers to trust as much as the business. If they're committed to funding for something, if they're committed to activities, marketing, whatever, they know what they're going to get when they're going to get it. But it's a partnership. You need to tell them how long it's going to take. They need to tell you what the vision looks like. Improve the flow, reducing work in progress, try and keep the momentum of flow. Don't make it too small that everything kind of bottles up. Don't make it too big that you're causing bottlenecks. But all this is about is reducing dependencies, decentralized decision-making, making the flow of work, uninterrupted. Self-managing teams, obviously. Smaller batch sizes. The reason we do smaller batch sizes, there's an operational level. If you go too small, you're costing more to do it because you're holding back feedback. So there's an operational size. But smaller batch sizes mean that there's less chance of change and more chance of you guaranteeing the delivery of it. So small as possible. Iterative delivery, I'm not going to talk about, what that's about. And by getting it out little and often, you can start earning quicker or reducing cost quicker. That brings me to the end. So hopefully you can see that 5.1 now has in it a number of things that address some of the issues and many of what you've already said too. I'm not getting away from the fact that SAFe is still an organization that charges the earth for some bits. So I fully, I'm an Agile coach first, but hopefully that's been of interest. Charles.
Mr. Alkesh, thank you very much indeed. Look, we've got about 10 minutes or so for questions. And there's been some amazing questions that have come up during the chat. Ashley, I know you were chatting away to a few folk to ask them whether they would like to come off mute, come on cam and ask some questions.
And you know what? We had a number of great questions and a fantastic level of chat and engagement. And actually, the questions are so far up the scrolly wheel that I can't find them right now. They're just peppered throughout conversations. So I'd invite folks that if you could, if you hover over your screen, on the bottom right bar, there's a button where you can raise your hand. So I think there were four people, if I remember correctly, that wrote questions, and I wrote back, please ask this at the end for Alkesh. So please, if you just raise hand, then it shows people in chronological order, and we'll just go left to right, really. So Nigel, you're first up with the hand up. Over to you.
I think I might have queue jumped a few people, but I don't mind. A brilliant talk, Alkesh. Fantastic. I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot. One of the things I find I'm a tools consultant, so I work with a lot of customers. It's not my own company that's trying to do SAFe. But one of the things I find is that because it's a framework, and I really loved your definition of what a framework is, that a lot of companies tell me they're doing SAFe, and really they're doing very poorly implemented Scrum with a bit of PI. And the question is really sort of how do we get them to the next level? How do we get them to kind of embrace the sort of value stream mapping and the lean portfolio management and all the rest?
Interesting question. I think quite often we find this generally with many methods as well as frameworks. People say that they're agile, and when you ask them, well, how's your retrospectives? What are you discussing in them? Oh, we don't do them. That's a waste of time. You know, and so you learn very quickly how agile they really are. When it comes to things like this kind of framework, I would go on the basis of what isn't working. Because remember I said it's a framework, you don't have to adopt all of it. So it could be that the percentage that they're adopting is actually working for them. Those bits that they're not using, what added value are they going to be? So I would look at it from the point of view of what's failing, what isn't really working for them because they're missing some elements. So I touched on retrospectives just now. We all know as coaches that that's one of the most important values that you do, because in order for you to understand how to work with each other better, the whole thing runs smoother. So that little bit of time that you spend doing the retro is invaluable. And likewise, you need to find what they're missing to then introduce those things. And the way to introduce them isn't through the method, it's the purpose. So identify why they need to refine better or why they need to adopt lean portfolio management. What is it that what's the purpose they're trying to hit? And then how do you appropriate that purpose using some of these techniques? And I dare say, you know, don't use the word agile, don't use any of the words from the SAFe glossary. Only speak business language, only speak purpose, why you're doing it, this is how you might get there. Oh, by the way, this is what you've just done.
Great, thank you.
Natalie, are you on still? I think I see you. Would you be comfortable? Oh, fantastic. Hello. Do you want to ask your question to Alkesh that you typed in the chat?
Yeah, it was a great chat. Thank you very much for that. Kind of for the, if you look at the several different frameworks that are kind of looking at the SAFe framework, it contains a lot of elements of it. Is it like, if you try to scale up a company, which type of framework would you use? And also kind of, can you use like different elements from those frameworks as well? Yes,
absolutely. In fact, they do all share with each other, because there's literally only the 12 closed principles that we had that support. But some of this has come from many years earlier, which is what I was trying to show you from the methods. They do share a lot with each other already, like XP is given a lot over to Scaled Agile. It's not to say that you can't use XP. Some companies do very heavily do that. Others use Crystal for scaling, but then they add PI planning, or they add elements of, weight to shortest job first, the prioritizing method. What that says is, what's the business value, what's the time criticality, and what's the opportunity or the risk reducer that you're doing. And those three numbers together form something called cost of delay. So what's the cost to you of not doing something? And then dividing that by how long you think something's going to take is a very simple math way of saying what the priority is. And the highest cost of delay is then the first thing that you should do. Even if it's something that looks like it's more value, if you go through that exercise across your backlog, you might find that something actually surprises you, that something lower down the list suddenly becomes the first thing that you do. And trust me, if you do that, you'll survive better, because now you're doing things of value, real value, compared to each other, and you're getting them out quicker because of the way the maths works. It's telling you that's what you should do. So weight to short job first is a really useful prioritizing technique. And I know many, many companies use it, but they don't adopt SAFe at all.
Brilliant. Alkesh, thank you. We've got some other questions coming in from Haroon's got a great question, which is one we needed some riots and chaos today, all in the chat. What is it about, so Haroon asks nicely, what is it about SAFe that most of the 17 Agile Manifesto co-authors have not given their blessing for? The most part, they have either been silent or not in favor of SAFe. Would be great to have your thoughts.
Sorry, Alkesh and Giles, I just wanted to be devil's advocate. And by the way, I'm neither here or there on the SAFe. I quite like the lean portfolio management approach. Actually, it's actually one of the only frameworks that actually does good justice to funding models and investment models. But I'm just curious. I want to say what you think.
It's a great question. Seriously, a great question.
It really is a great question. I mean, Scaled Agile don't have everything right. They introduced this thing called participatory budgeting. I don't know if you've heard of this before, but this is a technique where everybody in the room is given, each of the tables are given the same pot of money, and they decide what's best thing that they think that they should spend it on. And the idea of that kind of filters up the most popular thing that we should be doing. It's a little bit like prioritizing, but now it's based on what everybody would like to do rather than what everything we need to get done. Some things you're going to have to force to get done, obviously. Great idea. Sounds lovely that everybody should participate in it. However, I don't know a single company, and I've looked at evidence of this, a single company that does it. So some things are still in theory. I think in terms of from the manifesto days, from Dean Leffenwell, when he put this stuff together, if you look at the early SAFe 1, it was an attempt very similar to Scrum of Scrums and others, which tried to kind of build on methods and build a way in which companies could do it. But they commercialized it a bit too early. And although they commercialized it and they commoditized this, which is something we in Agile hate, because it's all this kind of common sense stuff really should be free. But when they commoditized, I think they probably lost a lot of authors then, because a lot of good authors in this field also think exactly that same way, that this stuff should be free. Yes, they sell books and stuff, obviously, but I mean, in terms of what they're saying and how it's working and how we help each other, how our community works. I mean, we do this stuff for free because we're passionate about it. We want to help each other and we want to grow. We want to, all of that gets stifled the minute something comes along and says, oh, no, you got to pay for this, you know. So I think that may have been a bit of an issue. But over the years, it's grown, it's changed, and it's sustained. And the State of Agile says 38% of the market's cornered by just SAFe. And with 5.1, I think it's continuing to grow. There will always be others. And this time next year, I'm sure there'll be 2 or 3 more on the market. However, SAFe continues to grow because it itself has very little in it, and it's borrowed and begged the best of people around it.
And I was just going to add one quick add to that. Haroon, phenomenal question. The funniest thing was, I don't know if you were there, obviously, Haroon, at the Agile 20 Reflect event that Dean turned up to, but he came along and started talking, and then he actually was a little bit grumpy because he felt he should have been invited to Snowbird, and he didn't get an invite.
Yeah.
So there was a little bit of tension in his talk at that point in time when he thought he should have been there to be signing the manifesto, but unfortunately he wasn't. So that's probably where some of that sort of tension and frustration is born from.
Thanks, Agile. Thank you.
Right, thanks, Haroon. Good one. Good question. Alkesh, we've had a couple people in the chat ask for some advice from you on, they have upcoming SAFe exams and wanted some tips on that. Would it be okay if they emailed you? I know that your email is in the bottom of the slides, or maybe they connect with you on LinkedIn and just ask specifically, perhaps, maybe just to help tailor for their specific needs.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And Zalika, I just saw your hand go down. Is that because I just asked?
Yes,
okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Good. Yeah, because there's a couple. I think there's a number of folks going for the SAFe exam soon. So Alkesh, I think your knowledge is going to be really helpful for some passing marks.
I'll try and help. I'm actually, I am enabled to teach any of the SAFe courses. There's 13 altogether now.
Oh, wow.
So
Good.
I can access material and help where I can, but
Fab.
absolutely.
Thank you.
And that's why I put my details at the bottom of all the slides, because like I say, it's just passion for me, and I'm happy to share.
Great. And I think we've got time for one more. And I think we've answered the questions in the backlog or on the chat.
Rohit's got his hand up.
Rohit, yeah, we've got last but not least, Rohit, you've been patiently waiting with your hand up.
Thank you guys. Thanks, Alkesh. Nice to see you, and wonderful session. Yeah. So my question is actually more of a how to tackle a challenge where, in SAFe art, right? Release train, we have a PO, we have a Scrum Master. So I think it depends on implementation to implementation, because if we have 4 teams, they're all working on the same product, but they have the same different POs. And POs are not empowered to make decisions because they have product manager to answer to. They get the priorities from product managers, and product managers get priorities from above, right? So how do you recommend to tackle these things? So how to make POs more empowered so they can make decisions and focus more on the value we're delivering?
That's why I said earlier that the product manager and that structure, although it looks hierarchical, they're not managers. The PO isn't a manager of a team, are they? But sometimes some organizations, they fall into that kind of role of, because the PO is saying what the priority is going to be, and because the PO is accepting what the team is going to produce, therefore it's like a manager you're working for. Oh my God, I hate that. It's not. The PO's job is simply to help prioritize against flow. The Scrum Master, the team need to work with the PO to say, right, looking at what you've prioritized and what we're going to do in the team, these are the things that we think we might need to do first, or these enablers, or this is, they're not first with the technical knowledge to that degree, so that they will have to listen to the team and feed up. This is where it all goes wrong, where people think it's push from the top. It's not. It's very much bottom up, top down. Top down is just the vision and the top few features and clarity on those, as you don't understand what good might look like. Beyond that, it's bottom up, and the bottom up, it should be a pull. Where bottom up, they're saying to the product owner, I'm not going to accept that next item until you tell me it's got acceptance criteria, until you tell me exactly what it's going to look like. I know enough about it to be able to estimate it, etc. Take charge. It's the other way around. The team are the in charge of what they do. The product owner is simply just clarifying and helping prioritize. And they need to push up to the product manager to say, my team says, technically, this is what needs to happen, or this is what they can't do, or we need more clarity on this item. Or they won't accept me to suddenly put something in on top, because they're saying, using weighted short shelf first, they're going to slot it in at number 3. What can you do about it? So it's all about listening to the team. The whole point of PI is about the team tells you, based on their capacity and their skills, what they can commit to delivering. You're going to throw all that away if you do push, where the product manager says, you're going to do this, and you're going to do it in this order. That's totally wrong. That's not an agile setup in the first place, let alone a safe one. I don't know.
Alkesh, look, thank you very much for an amazing set of answers. I mean, Alkesh, just for feedback and for you, the amount of thanks and support for the talk today in the chat has been exemplary as ever. And thank you to our normal community who are adding some amazing parts in there. Marcos, thank you as ever, even for turning up as a wolf. Femi as well. Yeah, genuinely, Alkesh, amazing. I'm surprised there wasn't more rotten tomatoes thrown. Werner did actually say he's still not convinced as he dropped, but he said major thanks to you and kudos for your talk. And lots of amazing thanks is coming up in the, if that's even such an English word, coming up in the chat for you right now.
Thank you all. This wasn't a selling talk about Agile, and I said about SAFe, and I did say I don't like the way they've commoditized it either, but it does answer a lot of the issues that even you said in your Slido that organizations have. So it is a good framework from that point of view.
Brilliant.
Thank you very much for listening.
I love Joe's comment. I held my tomatoes because I want to learn with an open mind. Thanks for the opportunity.
Fantastic.
Thank you, Joe, for holding and keeping your tomatoes, keeping them back. Fantastic. Well done, sir. All right. I'm going to pass over to my amazing co-host, Ashley. Ashley, over to you.
Hello. Right, so for the ALN, we've got 5 events diarized coming up. And actually on Friday, Giles and I are going to publish the 6th event. So we've got a really exciting spring and summer. And you guys are in luck because this week we have a double up on ALN sessions. So instead of the standard first Tuesday, third Tuesday of the month, we've got a second one this week for the Agile community, the Psychological Safety Fishbowl with Giles, as well as the Aginex community. It's a tag team event with different communities coming together, which is the whole point of what we're trying to do anyway with building bridges across the community. Next up, 2 weeks today, we've got a big panel event of organizational agility outside of tech with 4 key speakers. That's going to be really awesome and exciting, so stay tuned for that. Then we've got the testing festival upcoming, which is huge. Giles and his associates JPEG, they've got a fantastic lineup across multiple days and a lovely website. So check that out for sure. Then we've got towards mid-May, continuous improvement, agile business agility, bringing the tribes together with James Dewan. And after that, Craig Coburn, visualizing your agile strategy and seeing your roadmaps in context. So as always, if you have thoughts or you've listened to other presentations where you thought the speakers were really good, please let us know and share with us. Giles and I, the past week, worked on the 12-month roadmap for the ALN, and it's gotten pretty full already. But we're always open to suggestions and thoughts. What do you want to hear? What's interesting to you? What's perplexing you right now?
Partnerships, Rohit, partnerships. Whatever is interesting or on your mind or keeping you up at night, drop us a note, let us know, and we'll try to organize something to help work through that. So thank you all so much for joining. Alkesh, thank you, brilliant. And Giles, as always, thank you for hosting and leading us through these amazing sessions.
Thank you both. Thank you all.
Cheers, everybody. Hope you all have a good rest of your day and see you all very soon.
See you guys soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers.